My older brother stepped off the keynote stage in front of thousands of tech investors, grabbed me by the collar of my jacket, and shoved me hard into the chest of a waiting security guard. "Throw this convicted hacker out before she poisons my summit," David ordered into his headset microphone, his cold voice echoing across the massive auditorium and out to the millions watching the global livestream. As two guards pinned my arms behind my back and dragged me across the marble floor, David smoothed his perfectly tailored suit and offered the shocked crowd a rehearsed, apologetic smile. He thought he had just publicly executed the last remaining threat to his billion-dollar cybersecurity empire. What he didn't realize was that the encrypted phone burning a hole in my pocket contained the exact, unedited source code proving he was secretly selling national security backdoors to foreign syndicates. Safety is the unshakable foundation of the Vanguard empire. David's voice boomed through the state-of-the-art surround sound as the guards hauled me backward down the center aisle. And part of guaranteeing that safety is making difficult choices, even when the threat comes from your own blood. We had to remove a bad actor from the premises today, a known cyber criminal who attempted to compromise this very event. The applause that followed broke over me like a physical wave. It wasn't just clapping, it was a blind validation of his ruthlessness. In the front row VIP section, my sister-in-law, Elena, offered a look of solemn, dignified grief to the cameras. As Vanguard's chief communications officer, she had orchestrated this exact narrative. Even as my wrists bruised under the guards' tightening grips, I saw her tap her smartwatch, signaling her PR team to push the prepared press releases. Within seconds, my name would be trending globally as a disgraced, unhinged extortionist. Cameras flashed from the press pit, capturing my supposed walk of shame. I could see my face displayed on the secondary LED monitors. No makeup, my hair messy from the physical struggle, looking exactly like the desperate criminal Elena's media blast had just painted me to be. But I didn't scream. I didn't thrash against the security guards or shout that he was lying. Fighting would only give Elena the viral video clip of a crazy sister she so desperately wanted. I just kept my eyes locked on the glowing digital stock ticker running above the main stage, watching Vanguard's valuation climb higher with every elegant lie David told. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been this calm. 5 years ago, I was naive enough to believe that family protected each other, no matter what. Back then, Vanguard was a rising startup facing a catastrophic internal data breach that threatened to bankrupt the company right before its initial public offering. David, newly appointed as CEO, had come to my apartment in the middle of the night looking frantic and terrified. He and Elena sat at my kitchen table and told me they needed time to patch the vulnerability. And more importantly, they needed a scapegoat to appease the federal regulators. They promised it would be an internal reprimand, a slap on the wrist to satisfy the board. They used my administrative credentials to stage a fake paper trail, framing me as a rogue junior developer who had accidentally leaked the client database due to negligence. But they didn't keep it internal. When the FBI got involved, David handed them my hard drives. Elena gave tearful, sympathetic interviews to the press about how the family was devastated by my greed. I was indicted, pressured into a plea deal, and slapped with a federal ban from touching any commercial cybersecurity systems for 5 years. I lost my career, my life savings, and my reputation overnight. I spent half a decade ghostwriting code for minimum wage under fake names, living in a cramped studio apartment with a leaking roof, while David became a billionaire tech messiah. We sacrificed one to save the thousands of employees who depend on us, David had told me the day before my sentencing, patting my shoulder with chilling sincerity. It's what Dad would have wanted. The guards hauled me past the final rows of seating, bringing me back to the cold reality of the present. Investors in $3,000 suits turned in their chairs to watch me pass, their faces twisted in polite disgust. To them, I was a stain on the immaculate marble floor of their Silicon Valley utopia, a security threat successfully neutralized by their golden boy. "We are building an impenetrable wall around your digital lives," David continued on stage, raising a confident hand to quiet the lingering applause. The stage lights caught the silver of his expensive watch. "At Vanguard, we do not negotiate with vulnerabilities. We eliminate them. We are building an impenetrable wall around your digital lives," David continued on stage, raising a confident hand to quiet the lingering applause. The stage lights caught the silver of his expensive watch. "At Vanguard, we do not negotiate with vulnerabilities. We eliminate them." We were 10 feet from the heavy steel doors at the back of the auditorium. The silence in the convention center was no longer the polite, attentive quiet of a tech keynote. It was the suffocating, oxygen-starved vacuum of a room waiting for a bomb to detonate. The two security guards who had been dragging me only seconds earlier practically threw their hands in the air, backing away from me as if my jacket had suddenly caught fire. I stayed right where I was, standing in the center aisle, letting the bruises on my wrists throb. The pain was sharp, but it anchored me. It was the last physical reminder of the victim they had tried to make me. On the massive stage, David's perfectly engineered CEO persona flickered. For a fraction of a second, the charismatic tech visionary vanished, replaced by the terrified older brother who had shown up at my apartment 5 years ago, begging for a scapegoat. But David was a survivor. He gripped the edges of the sleek acrylic podium, took a slow breath, and forced the polished smile back onto his face. "Director Hayes," David said, his voice projecting smoothly through his headset mic. He spread his hands in a gesture of open, innocent confusion. "This is a highly irregular disruption. We are in the middle of a global keynote. If there is a misunderstanding regarding my sister's tragic mental health situation, my legal team would be more than happy to speak with you privately off stage." "There will be no private conversations today, David," the director replied, his voice unamplified, but carrying a cold military precision that cut through the cavernous hall. "Privacy is what allowed you to sell out this country's infrastructure in the first place." In the VIP section, Elena finally panicked. The elegant, grief-stricken sister-in-law routine evaporated. She aggressively tapped the shoulder of the production manager sitting in the front row, frantically drawing a finger across her throat. It was the universal broadcast signal to cut the feed. She wanted to kill the cameras. She wanted to throw the live stream to a holding graphic before Vanguard's shareholders saw another second of this disaster. The production manager scrambled to speak into his walkie-talkie, but he stopped abruptly. Up in the glass-walled AV booth overlooking the auditorium, 3 men in federal windbreakers had already taken position behind the master control board. The red recording lights on the massive studio cameras framing the stage remained glowing. The livestream was not going down. Every investor, every tech journalist, and every global competitor was watching this live. Elena stared up at the booth, the color draining from her flawless face. I knew exactly what was running through her mind. The automated PR blast she had launched 3 minutes ago, the one branding me as an unhinged, dangerous criminal, was already live on every major news outlet. She had just publicly documented their defamation in real time, right in front of the federal government. "Director, I demand you clear this room," David barked, his voice rising in pitch, the charm finally breaking. "You are trespassing on private corporate property. Vanguard is a trusted government contractor. We secure the Pentagon's auxiliary servers. You do not have the jurisdiction to march in here and disrupt a shareholder event based on the delusions of a disgruntled ex-employee." Director Hayes didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. "As of 0600 hours this morning, Vanguard Cyber Defense has been stripped of all federal security clearances," the director announced, reading the words like a death sentence. "Your government contracts are void. Your corporate assets are frozen under the National Security Act. And your disgruntled ex-employee has been operating as a federally protected asset for the last 8 months." The ballroom erupted into a chaotic symphony of gasps, hurried whispers, and the frantic clicking of press cameras. The venture capitalists sitting in the front rows, the same men and women who had vigorously applauded my public execution moments ago, began aggressively typing on their phones, likely screaming at their brokers to dump their Vanguard shares before the market completely registered the catastrophe. I rolled my shoulders, feeling the tension bleed out of my spine. I turned away from the heavy steel doors and faced the stage. I started walking. I didn't rush. I walked with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who owned the room. The sea of tailored suits parted for me. Investors pulled their knees in, shrinking back into their velvet chairs, terrified to even accidentally brush against the woman who had just brought the most powerful cybersecurity firm in Silicon Valley to its knees. "Maya, stop!" David hissed through his teeth as I reached the base of the stage stairs. He covered his microphone with his hand, dropping the public facade completely. His eyes were wide, bloodshot with panic. "Maya, whatever you think you found, you're taking this out of context. Think about the family. Think about Dad's legacy. If you do this, you destroy everything he built." I paused on the first step. It was the exact same manipulation tactic he had used 5 years ago. He always invoked our father's ghost when he was too cowardly to take responsibility for his own actions. Dad built a firewall, I said quietly, looking up at him. You built a backdoor, and you charged a premium for it. I walked up the remaining stairs and stepped onto the immaculate, brilliantly lit stage. David backed away from me as if I were carrying a live explosive. In a way, I was. I walked straight past him and stopped in front of the master presentation console, the sleek, glowing terminal David had been using to showcase his fake security metrics. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my encrypted phone. A heavy, braided data cable rested on the console, waiting to be plugged in. I looked at David, then out at the blinding stadium lights and the thousands of faces staring back at me in stunned silence. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to throw a punch. I just needed to show them the truth. I didn't resist. I just focused on the digital clock mounted on the convention center wall. 10:42 a.m., right on schedule. As the guards reached for the push bars to throw me out into the alley, the heavy steel doors didn't just open. They slammed inward with a deafening crash that echoed all the way to the front stage. The guard stumbled backward, releasing my arms in sheer surprise. A flood of harsh daylight spilled into the dark, cinematic auditorium, silhouetting a line of men and women wearing dark suits and tactical federal windbreakers. The polite murmurs in the crowd died instantly. On stage, David's perfect smile faltered. His hand reached instinctively toward his earpiece, waiting for Elena to feed him a line to control the sudden disruption. Stepping through the center of the federal agents was an older man with silver hair and eyes as cold as a winter ocean. He didn't wear an event badge. He didn't need one. He was the director of the National Security Agency. He walked 3 steps into the room, scanning the frozen crowd before fixing his gaze directly on the main stage. The silence in the massive hall was absolute, heavy with the terrifying realization that the polished corporate script had just been violently rewritten. The director pointed a steady finger at the 2 security guards who were now backing away from me in a panic. "Let her go!" His voice cracked through the silence like a gunshot, requiring no microphone to carry its absolute authority. Then, he looked up at the massive screens projecting David's suddenly pale face. "The woman you just ordered your men to assault is not a criminal. She's the only reason the federal government hasn't shut down your entire infrastructure this morning." The moment the braided data cable snapped into the bottom of my phone, the massive 50-foot LED screens backing the keynote stage flickered. The polished oceanic blue of the Vanguard cyber defense logo stuttered, glitched, and instantly dissolved into the stark, unforgiving black background of a raw command terminal. A collective gasp rippled through the convention center. I stepped up to the acrylic podium, moving David's abandoned keynote notes aside, and pulled the microphone toward me. My hands weren't shaking anymore. After 5 years of hiding in the shadows, stepping into the blinding glare of the stage lights felt like coming up for air. For the past 5 years, Vanguard has promised you an impenetrable fortress, I said, my voice echoing evenly across the silent auditorium. It didn't waver. It carried the heavy, undeniable weight of someone who no longer had anything left to lose. My brother sold you peace of mind. He sold you the illusion that your data, your hospitals, your financial grids, and your personal lives were safe behind his walls. But a wall is only as secure as the architect who builds it. I swiped a finger across my phone screen. On the giant displays behind me, thousands of lines of complex source code began cascading downward at lightning speed. The harsh white text reflected in David's terrified, wide eyes. "This is the core architecture of Aegis," I announced, naming Vanguard's flagship security software, the exact product David had been pitching to the world just 10 minutes ago. It took me 8 months of tracing encrypted server logs to find it, but it's right there. Lines 4,000 to 4,080. I tapped a command. The scrolling code froze. A specific block of text in the center of the massive screen, highlighted in a glowing, blood-red hue. "That is not a glitch," I explained, looking out at the sea of pale faces in the investor section. "That is an intentional, hard-coded backdoor. A hidden bypass integrated directly into the foundational framework of the software. It allows anyone with the correct cryptographic key to walk right past Vanguard's million-dollar firewalls without leaving a single footprint in the security logs." David lunged forward, his hands grasping frantically at the podium. "She's manipulating the display," he shouted into the air, though his microphone had been cut by the federal agents in the AV booth. His voice sounded thin and reedy without the digital amplification. That is a doctored file. It's a deep fake. She's trying to crash our stock out of pure jealousy. Director Hayes simply nodded to one of the federal agents standing at the base of the stairs. The agent walked up, placed a firm, immovable hand on David's chest, and pushed him backward. David stumbled, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the polished stage floor. "I didn't forge the code, David," I said, turning to look at him. "And I certainly didn't forge the bank records." I swiped my screen a second time. The red highlighted source code shrank to the left side of the LED displays, making room for a complex web of blockchain transaction logs on the right. Long strings of alphanumeric cryptographic hashes filled the screen, linking to dates and timestamps. "Leaving a door open is only half the crime," I told the silent crowd. "You still have to get paid by the people walking through it." I ran a decryption script I had written 3 weeks earlier. The anonymous alphanumeric hashes on the screen instantly translated into recognizable data points. The crowd began to murmur, a low, buzzing sound of rising panic. "Over the last 3 years, Vanguard clients have suffered 7 major ransomware attacks," I said, pointing to the dates on the screen. In every single instance, the affected companies paid millions in untraceable cryptocurrency to international syndicates to unlock their data. But if you look at the ledger, you will see that exactly 48 hours after every ransom was paid, 20% of those funds were routed through a series of offshore tumbling services. I tapped the screen one final time. The tumbling services traced down to 3 specific static offshore accounts registered in the Cayman Islands. "Those accounts don't belong to a Russian syndicate or a rogue hacking group," I stated, my voice ringing with cold finality. "They belong to an LLC registered under Elena's maiden name. You didn't just fail to protect your clients, David. You built the backdoor, sold the keys to the highest bidder, and took a 20% cut of the ransom when your own customers were extorted." The auditorium exploded. It wasn't a murmur anymore. It was sheer, unadulterated chaos. Venture capitalists sprang from their velvet chairs, shouting into their phones. Tech journalists were practically screaming into their recording devices, narrating the biggest corporate collapse in Silicon Valley history, live on air. In the front row, Elena scrambled out of her seat. She dropped her designer handbag, pushing past a row of stunned executives in a desperate bid to reach the side exit. But the federal windbreakers were already there. 2 agents blocked the aisle, their expressions completely bored as Elena crashed into them, screaming about her rights and demanding her lawyers. I looked up at the digital stock ticker suspended above the stage. The green numbers that had been steadily climbing all morning had frozen. A second later, the color snapped to a violent, glaring red. The arrows pointed straight down. Vanguard's valuation wasn't just dropping, it was in a terrifying, unprecedented freefall. Millions of dollars in market cap were vaporizing in real time as automated trading algorithms reacted to the live broadcast of a federal raid, an irrefutable proof of treason. David stood near the edge of the stage, his hands gripping his hair, his perfect suit looking suddenly oversized and ridiculous on his shrinking frame. He stared at the red arrows plunging on the ticker, his lips moving soundlessly. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't looking at the director. He was watching his entire identity burn to ash. He had spent 5 years calling me a criminal to build his empire. It took me exactly 5 minutes of truth to tear it to the ground. The mechanical click of the steel handcuffs locking around David's wrists was picked up by his headset microphone, broadcasting the sharp, metallic sound to millions of people watching around the world. He didn't fight the federal agents. He didn't have the strength left. As they pulled his arms behind his back, forcing him into the exact same humiliating posture his security guards had forced upon me just 10 minutes earlier, his knees buckled slightly. The immaculate CEO facade had completely melted away, leaving behind nothing but a hollow, terrified man who had finally been cornered by his own code. In the center aisle, Elena was far less cooperative. 2 FBI agents were physically dragging her toward the heavy steel doors as she kicked and screamed, her designer heels slipping on the polished marble. She was demanding her lawyers, threatening the agents with lawsuits, and shrieking about her constitutional rights. But no one in the VIP section stood up to help her. The investors, the board members, and the tech journalists simply stepped out of her way, holding up their phones to record the spectacular implosion of Silicon Valley's most glamorous power couple. As the agents turned David toward the stairs to lead him off the stage, he stopped. He looked over his shoulder at me. His eyes were wide, brimming with a pathetic mixture of rage and betrayal. "You destroyed our family, Maya," he whispered, his voice trembling as the unmuted microphone carried the words into the dead silence of the auditorium. Everything Dad built, everything we had, you burned it all down. I looked at him, feeling the absolute, crystalline clarity of a woman who had spent 5 years walking through fire just to reach this exact moment. I didn't destroy the family, David, I said, my voice steady, ringing out across the massive hall. I just patched the vulnerability. The agents jerked him forward, marching him down the stairs and out of the spotlight. The heavy steel doors at the back of the auditorium slammed shut behind him, sealing his fate. On the massive LED screens above me, Vanguard's stock ticker finally hit the circuit breaker. Trading was automatically halted due to catastrophic volatility. The empire was officially dead. Director Hayes stepped up to the acrylic podium. He didn't smile, but the hard, winter ocean coldness in his eyes had softened into something resembling respect. He reached down, carefully unplugged my braided data cable from the master console, and handed my phone back to me. The Department of Justice filed the motion 30 minutes before we walked through those doors, the director said quietly, ensuring his voice didn't carry past the two of us. The 2021 conviction has been vacated. Your record is officially expunged, Maya. You have your name back. I took the phone from his hand. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times while sitting in my freezing, leaking studio apartment, typing ghost code for minimum wage. I thought I would cry. I thought I would collapse. But I didn't. I just took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the air fill my lungs completely, for the first time in half a decade. Thank you, Director, I whispered. He gave a sharp nod. We have a debriefing team waiting for you outside, but take your time. You earned the walk. I turned away from the podium and walked down the center aisle of the auditorium. The crowd parted for me in absolute silence. The same investors who had looked at me with disgust earlier now watched me with a mixture of awe and terror. They realized they weren't looking at a disgraced hacker. They were looking at the architect of the greatest digital takedown in corporate history. When I pushed through the front doors of the convention center, the harsh, bright California sunlight hit my face. The air smelled like pine trees and hot asphalt. It smelled like freedom. The aftermath of the summit did not resolve in a single day. The fallout from the Vanguard collapse dominated the global news cycle for months. The FBI raid on their headquarters uncovered servers full of encrypted communications between David, Elena, and 3 highly monitored international cybercrime syndicates. The paper trail was so irrefutable that even the most expensive defense attorneys in the country refused to take their case. David and Elena were indicted on 54 counts of wire fraud, corporate espionage, and violating the Espionage Act. They were denied bail, deemed ultimate flight risks given their offshore crypto wallets. Vanguard filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy before the end of the month, its remaining assets seized by the federal government to compensate the victims of the ransomware attacks David had secretly facilitated. My parents tried to call me a week after the arrests. They left frantic voicemails, crying, begging me to explain what had happened, asking if I could help pay for David's legal defense fund. They said that family needed to stick together in times of crisis. I changed my phone number the very next day. You cannot stick together with people who only use the word family as a leash to pull you back into their dysfunction. I finally understood that I didn't owe my loyalty to the people who had gladly watched me drown so they could stay on a sinking ship. A year later, I didn't return to the shadows. I opened my own boutique cybersecurity firm. I didn't hide behind a fake name anymore. The plaque on my office door says Maya Vance, right in the open, daring anyone to doubt my credentials. My firm doesn't build unbreachable walls because I know better than anyone that no wall is perfect. Instead, we hunt the people who try to sell the keys. People often ask me if I feel guilty for tearing down my own brother on a global stage. They ask if I regret not handling it quietly, behind closed doors, to protect the family name. The answer is no. I don't feel an ounce of guilt. Guilt belongs to the people who betray you. Peace belongs to the people who refuse to carry the weight of those betrayals any longer. When toxic people try to write you into their story as the villain, you do not sit quietly in the margins and accept the role. You walk onto the stage, you take the pen out of their hands, and you rewrite the code. So I have to ask you, have you ever been the scapegoat in your family or your workplace? Have you ever had to stand up, look the people who lied about you in the eye, and force them to face the truth they tried to bury? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Because if you are currently standing in the dark, waiting for your moment to turn on the lights, I promise you, you are not alone. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next story.